as he continues to look for a new deal there. So something to keep our eye on. And when we go to Cleveland, there's a lot to look at. The next era of Browns first-year players suiting up this week for a mini camp. But the real question we're looking at is the quarterback situation. Kind of got two battles going on right now. Rookies Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders fighting for that QB3 spot. But QB1 also up for debate as well between Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. So let's break it all down. We've got our NFL analyst Mike Renner, and we've also got our lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones joining us. Guys, want to pick up the conversation there with the QB1 conversation. And JJ, I'll come to you first because all the conversation feels like it's Joe Flacco's job to lose, but then you also got Kenny Pickett in there who's got some experience too. What are you hearing about who's going to get the nod as QB1 in Cleveland?
Yeah, well, certainly, first of all, this is going to have to play out over the span of training camp and joint practices and preseason games, right? Someone is going to have to win this job. I wouldn't say that Joe Flacco has to lose it. I do think that it can be a legitimate competition with Kenny Pickett, no matter what you or Mike or anyone at home may think about Kenny Pickett, his failed tenure with the Pittsburgh Steelers relative to his draft slot or what he did as a backup with the Super Bowl champion Eagles. And so, look, Joe Flacco, while he did bring the Cleveland Browns franchise back to the playoffs those 2 seasons ago, well, last year he wasn't very good with the Colts, right? Some of that magic had certainly worn off. And so this is a team, a coaching staff, certainly a personnel group that wants to see this battle play out between these two. I do believe that Joe Flacco certainly has the leg up in competition against Kenny Pickett. If they go out the first 3 days of training camp and 2 of those days Joe Flacco is getting reps with the ones, that wouldn't surprise me. But 2 weeks from now, if that has flipped, well, that's all up to Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett.
It's just going to be interesting dynamic between those two. Renner, if we take it a step further, I want to take a look here at the Browns' schedule, particularly when it comes to those first 4 games of the season. They've got the Bengals, the Ravens, the Packers, and then the Lions. So if you had to have a conversation between those two guys, Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco, who's the guy that you're putting your money on to get you at least 1 win through those first 4?
To me, it's Joe Flacco, just because we've seen him do it in this offense already. I mean, I think it's very telling that Kenny Pickett, a former first-rounder who should be getting all this deference given that draft capital, has been given up on by 2 teams already. The team that drafted him after only 2 seasons and the team that just won the Super Bowl, who's one of the best run teams in the NFL, said that he wouldn't even have won the backup job if he had been there with Tanner McKee in the fold. So I do think that's a lot of evidence to say he hasn't shown enough. And with Joe Flacco, we've at least seen some. Kenny Pickett, 1 career 300-yard passing game. Joe Flacco had 5 the last time he was, 5 straight, excuse me, the last time he was in the Cleveland Browns uniform. So for all those reasons, I just think Flacco gives you the higher ceiling. Maybe he gives you a pretty low floor at this point, what we saw last year with the Colts, but I think he can also put some match together at any given moment in a way that Kenny Pickett just can't or hasn't shown the ability to over the course of his career.
Of course, that's just one battle going on in that QB room. You also have to think about the rookie battle between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, who's going to be the QB3. Renner, I know you're a big Dillon Gabriel guy. We've seen questions about his size, his ability to adapt to the NFL level. What do you think? Are you putting your money on Dillon Gabriel to get that start, or are you leaning more towards Shedeur Sanders? Or I shouldn't say start, but QB3. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I would put my money on Dillon Gabriel. I've been outspoken about this. I think the biggest difference and why I think right out the gate he would, even if, Shedeur maybe the higher upside in terms of long-term ability, is just that he's not going to take the sacks that Shedeur Sanders does. He averaged 20 sacks per season taken over the 5 years he started in college between Oregon, Oklahoma, UCF. Shedeur averaged 45 per year. So almost over twice as many at Colorado as Gabriel did over the course of his career. And we watched what Deshaun Watson when he was on that record pace before his injury in terms of sacks taken, and the offense just was terrible. So you can't have that at the quarterback position in the NFL early on in your career. It's something we saw Caleb Williams really struggle with at USC and then translate early into his career. So I think if push comes to shove, if one of these is going to get thrown to the fire, I would probably trust Gabriel more early on.
Okay, so we're leaning more Dillon Gabriel, QB3. So then JJ, when we look at that final QB roster spot, whatever it is, it kind of feels like either Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders is going to be on the practice squad. So if we're staying in the simulation here, if we're going with Mike Renner saying that's going to be Dillon Gabriel, that leaves Shedeur Sanders potentially on the practice squad. Is that a place where you see him sticking around? Is that an opportunity for another team to maybe come in and sign him? What do you project when it comes to Shedeur Sanders if, in fact, Dillon Gabriel wins the battle?
If Dylan Gabriel wins the battle against Shedeur Sanders in the battle of the rookies, I actually don't see Shedeur Sanders going to the practice squad. If Shedeur Sanders beats Dylan Gabriel, I don't see Dylan Gabriel going to the practice squad. And I also don't see the Cleveland Browns keeping 4 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. And so now the answer is, well, who goes, Jonathan? Well, the answer to that is whoever is the loser of Joe Flacco versus Kenny Pickett, right? Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, he loathes cutting his draft picks. Certainly in the first year, certainly in the second year, even into the third and sometimes fourth year. This is a team that always holds on to its draft picks far more than average NFL teams. And so I don't see, because when you do cut a player, especially one on a rookie contract, you subject them to waivers. And so before you can put them on your practice squad, any of the other 31 teams could come pluck them off of waivers, and now you don't have a guy. Also, if and when that player does get on the practice squad, a team could always come sign that player and promise them a fully guaranteed contract and a starting job on their 53-man roster. So the Browns will not expose either rookie to those waivers and put one on the practice squad. The loser of Joe Flacco versus Kenny Pickett will try to be traded. That is my overwhelming expectation. And if the Browns cannot trade one of those players, then ultimately that player would then be cut. I don't know that a practice squad position is something that either one of those players would want. Maybe they would go be a free agent and wait for their next opportunity. But when it comes to the 2 rookies, I do not at all see the Browns placing either one of them on the practice squad, no matter how this plays out by the end of August.
And as if that isn't enough of a headache to sort of sort out in season, you then also have the headache that is Deshaun Watson and trying to figure out what you're going to do with him in the future, JJ. We know that it's looking like he's going to start on the PUP, dealing with the re-injured Achilles injury there. But when it comes to the future of Deshaun Watson here, feels really odd to have 5 quarterbacks on your roster here. What can we expect? We've heard the front office come out and say, like, that contract a few years ago maybe wasn't the best idea. So how do we move forward when it comes to Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, not just front office, but ownership. And something that, while Jimmy Haslam may not have been saying anything improper or incorrect, you just never hear that from ownership. But he said it, and they all know that there. Yes, I can report that Deshaun Watson, he will not begin the season on injured reserve. He is going to start training camp when veterans report on the physically unable to perform list. There is no expectation of Deshaun Watson being ready to play football competitively for the Cleveland Browns at all, at least in the first half of the season. And then if you just look at historical precedent, if you consider how rare it is for a player to tear his Achilles and then tear it again in short order, it is hard to imagine that he will be able to come back at all in the 2025 season, even if the Browns need him competitively, right, to play for them this upcoming year. And then you have to wonder about 2026. Yes, sure, he should be healthy and ready to go by then. Will the Browns have extricated themselves from his contract at that point? They've kicked the can down the road. They've pushed some money into the future, as the Browns are wont to do. One would think they could get out of it, and yes, it would be painful financially before the 2026 season, but there is also a very real world where they hang on to that contract. Now, whether he would still actually be on the team or not, a matter of debate. We're still several months away from that. But yeah, I don't know that we'll see Deshaun Watson suiting up for the Cleveland Browns on the field this season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, JJ. I think you just tell him to go home this year. We have enough problems. We have enough of the circus at the quarterback position. We don't need any more. But here's the thing. He is 29 years old, and he is on your roster in 2026, or costing your roster, I should say, $80 million in 2026, whether you like it or not. Yeah, you could push some of that down the road, whatever. But he's only going to be 30 then. And I do think there's a real world where they invite him back, and he'll be, a year and a half removed from his Achilles at that point, and still try to recapture the guy that they thought they were trading for, the guy who in his last time with the Houston Texans led the league in passing yards and yards per attempt, who they felt comfortable enough to give a guaranteed contract to that I don't think anyone's going to give to a quarterback again after what happened with him. But he is not Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles. He is still in the sort of prime of his career, should be in the prime of his career, where he can come back fully healthy. So for all those reasons, I don't think the Browns are fully giving up on him, but I think 2025, they're just telling him to stay home.
Just stay home. Don't add to the problems, Deshaun, please. All right, guys, we appreciate the time. I know training camps are coming up. You guys are going to be very busy, and we are going to be very...
What do you